Hey guys, welcome to that evening spark for that part 2 of overcoming sexual temptation. So, before I crack into the ways we can utilize the characteristics of God's teachers um, to overcome sexual temptation, I wanted to preface that, I think, with uh, how like when we go on things like when we make the body an emphasis, and how things like when like Tinder, for instance, and Bumble and all these things, and they're not necessarily wrong in and of themselves, but I will say that they often are this. They exasperate, I think, something that's brewing in a lot of us, in the sense of that feeling of not being satisfied, not feeling like you're enough. I gotta go and seek out this to boost my ego, to know that I am good enough because I'll get all these likes and this, that, and the other. And a lot of times the relationships just aren't they don't have that foundation. I think some people understand that going into it, and that's the thing. It feels like a lot of times with these relationships, it's this constant striving for something and never being satisfied, to seek and not find. And sometimes, maybe to some extent, I would say that the people who are so fine with that become numb. It may be that we've just become so numb to that. That's the thing to perhaps address with that, in that sense. Now, if Tinder's your thing, Bumble and what have you, more power to you. I think there's a moving trend of the more digital dating and things of that nature. But I've gone away from that because I felt like it was like I was having to put my self-esteem on display, and say my worth on self-display. Like, here's my worth. And then, because it pretty much is the world saying, hey, if you don't have a lot of likes, that means you aren't very appealing, and that means you're not very worthy. And that can be pretty depressing. It can almost makes it more worse. Some of those, you hear some of the stories about these guys, hey, they're getting laid every weekend kind of thing. But really, I feel like that's more of as much as we may think that's a common thing, I don't know, to be honest. I think, and really, those people who do that all the time, it's kind of like, where's the foundation, man? Like, where's the sense of satisfaction? They don't often have it. They feel like they have to keep doing that. Can we not learn to be content? But anyways, let's crack into these characteristics. So when it comes to trust, being the first one, we'll start from the beginning and go till the end. So for trust, learning that everything is helpful. And this kind of relates to the single people out there, is that when you have that sense of trust, you recognize that everything, all circumstances, all events and things are helpful and are for your benefit. You recognize that you being single doesn't reflect your sense of worth, but in fact, it very well is an opportunity for you to be able to go forward in a way that you very well couldn't if you were in a relationship. And it establishes that you are whole, you are complete. You recognize that within you. Perhaps the Holy Spirit is wanting you to not keep going back to relationships, because when we are still in love with ghosts and fantasies, we often seek that out in our partner, to have them fulfill that, putting them on this bizarre pedestal where they can't be themselves, and a relationship can't be what it needs to be, because it's bogged down with all this baggage. And so, in all honesty, this time for singleness can actually be a great opportunity for introspection, healing, going forward and doing things that you couldn't do, recognizing that you don't need to be waiting for nobody to be happy. That you're whole and complete now, not later down the line. You ain't looking for your better half. You are whole and complete now. And that's beautiful, okay? And with the concept of trust, it reflects a dynamic part of reshaping your value system. So to those who say who the dynamic of guilt and shame may not seem to be associated with them in those promiscuous activities, and they don't feel normal enough about it, but yet you also got to look at their lives. A lot of times I've noticed it's like these people there's a lot of drama involved in their lives. There's a lot of hate. There's a lot of apathy, and just there's that lack of depth needed for which to be able to have these rich, engaging relationships of love and embrace and acceptance and joy. And I think that for those people, I think perhaps they've lost touch with that, and maybe not. I know, I mean, everybody's different, but I will say from what I've noticed from my experience and for myself, there's a certain sort of shifting of your values, and I think this coincides with honesty in the sense that you've got to be consistent with yourself, because if you got to think about what are your values, what do you value in your life, and are your actions reflecting that? Do you truly believe that you are the Holy Son of God, eternal, free, and whole, forever at peace in the heart of God? And is that as your brother is as well? See, this is the utility of compassion, because it allows us to see as Christ is, as Christ does, with forgiveness and love. And so with that being the case, that honesty, with it, it's like, am I living a life that's in honesty with myself? And with all this, it's like, in the event of temptation, when it arises, call upon this strain of thought. And if it can get past all this and you feel fine after you pretty much put it through these 10 tests of, okay, does this reflect me recognizing that everything is helpful for me because I feel like I'm going at this from a sense of deprivation and lack, then am I truly believing that where I'm at is where I need to be? Because if you don't, then you must not believe inadvertently that everything is thus for your help. That you wish you could be where they're at and not where you're at. So that's almost a sense of ingratitude, not to be too harsh on you, but it's just that sense that we have to recognize, man, where I'm at, this is beautiful. So that's why the whole essence of boredom, and boredom is the devil's playground. If you recognize the beauty of where you're at, take that as a moment of respite and peace and a time to be able to relax, because you ain't know what was going to happen. And you're going to wish in those times when it's getting hectic that you wish you could have that moment of peace where you were able to just sit and not really have to do anything. And it could be a moment to energize thought, to go in a better direction, to say, I'm not doing anything right now. What could I do to help better someone's life? To think, to pray, meditate, all these things. I don't know. It's different for everybody else. But that's what I would say when it comes to that sense of honesty. But from that, whenever we come and fall, because it happens from time to time, it's a continual journey, that tolerance of yourself, and that sense of acceptance and not judging yourself. See, the condemnation is from the ego, and he wants us to hate ourselves, condemn ourselves. But if Christ did not condemn the adulterous woman, who are we to then condemn ourselves? Because, see, judgment isn't just about not judging others. You can't judge yourself. And it may seem that, by not judging myself, I'm not going to then, that I can just do whatever because I just don't judge myself. But see, often that's a facade, that's a cover of how much we actually do feel that pain. That a lot of times that sense of feeling, I'll just do whatever, is us, in a sense, throwing away our spiritual inheritance. Not that you can really, but you're throwing away your awareness of what you have within you. And so that's the thing where we have to be willing to look within ourselves and say, I'm not going to judge myself. Because, see, that gentleness, and we're moving on to gentleness. See, it's that gentleness of not wanting to do harm to do unto another, because harm is the outcome of judgment. That sense of self-hate, that self-condemnation. It doesn't do us any good. And from that, it'll then shape how we view the world. So from that self-condemnation, we're going to then condemn our brother, because the measure for which we condemn our brother is the measure for which we have that weakness upon ourselves. Because hate is weakness. Anger is weakness. Because when you've become angry, you have allowed that thing to control you. It is by our calm state of mind, of truth and certainty, that gives us that conviction to be able to overcome it. Because here's the thing, as you view the world from your perspective of your values, and this goes back to trust, it's going to shape how you decide to determine things, your choices, what you will go forward and do. Because if you believe the world is a horrible place, it's going to make you, some of this stuff won't really even make sense to you. But if you recognize the truth of the world, that it's not made of the laws of the world, but it is held together by the laws of love, by the laws of God, the true world. Not this false lies of illusions that tell you that you're nothing, that by every sexual act, you're like a piece of tape that gets less and less sticky. That's a horrible connotation, because it makes us feel like we're pieces of shit and that we don't really have any value. That's the value that the world would hold upon you and oppress you down with. That is not the true value of what God has for you, that truth and worth within you that goes beyond measure. And it's beautiful. And from that gentleness within yourself, you gotta be gentle. I can't stress that enough. It is the gentleness of ourselves to pick ourselves back up, to be picked up by the Holy Spirit, and to try once more. That's all you can ask. And from that joy, we're able to help see a better world. When we realize we don't have to try and make ourselves. We don't have to try and be something. I don't have to try and be this guy who knows how to say all these right words. See, that's the thing that we stress ourselves out about. I'm sorry, ladies, but I can't figure you out half the time. But that's okay, because I'm sure you can't figure us out half the time. It's amazing. After all the years, we haven't evolved into a state where we can understand one another. But I think the point remains that we don't have to worry about having to feel like we've got to be this person. Because again, you are whole and complete and enough as you are. And you don't have to try and be more than what you are, but let your truth within you extend. Let that beauty of who you are extend. See, I'll see beautiful women all the time. I'll see them out and about. But one thing I have to remind myself is that I don't have to feel like I wish I was the guy who could be with her. Oh, I'm not good enough for her. All this. I think less of myself. That's not humility. That's lowliness. True humility is recognizing that where your strength comes from, and my strength and all of our strength truly comes from God. And so that sense of defenselessness lets us recognize it takes a huge load off of ourselves. And so then going forward into generosity, because I'm running out of time. A sense of generosity when it comes to things like masturbation and porn and self-pleasure and things of that nature is that what I've come to realize, what it comes down to is that is this act that I'm doing is something that I can give away. You can't give that stuff away. It's isolating. It keeps you from loving others all too often. There is a sense of self-love that we need to have to be sure about that, and that there is the sexual side to it all, and that is true. But I think it's one of those things where it's like, I'm willing to wait. I want to be willing to wait because I want my love to be a love that I can give away and not be this isolated dynamic. And you can fall into that trap being in the special love relationship where it's an isolated, excluded sense that only for me, it's jealous. But you gotta have it be willing to open up, loving someone with open hands. I've had to learn that from time and time again. But that doesn't mean that you still can't love them for all that they are. That's the beautiful thing of it all, friends. And here's the thing. Now we move on to patience. And when it comes to patience, it's knowing your outcome, knowing that you can overcome this, that if you have that sexual temptation, that this outcome is certain. You don't maybe know when, and it's going to be a continual journey, but you know it's eventually going to happen. The ultimate interpretation of all things will come about. And that those things in the past, don't beat yourself up over it. Remember gentleness. Be compassionate on yourself. Recognize that they very well helped you be where you need to be now. And that is extremely important. Because if you hadn't had that, you very well would not have had the understanding of where you're at now. I can't tell you enough. Had I not had gone through all that, I would not be able to be here telling you this genuine advice to help you. And then we move on to faithfulness. And faithfulness is that essence of being able to, again, put the foundation under all of this to be able to recognize that God will help set all these things right in your life. That if you will just but give him those things unto God, unto the Holy Spirit, he will give you the help that you need. Okay? And finally, with open-mindedness, this is the biggest thing. Whenever confronted with sexual temptation, ask yourself, would this act prevent forgiveness? Because we might think, oh no, it's just the sexual, nothing wrong with it. But all too often when we focus on the body, we get the things of the body, and the body is of isolation, deprivation, and you attack when you feel a sense of deprivation. You feel that cold sting of mortality. And so you don't recognize the allness of your spirit, baby. So you give that allness. You say, it's the guilt, the shame that prevents the forgiveness within yourself and in others. So that's what you got to be willing to say, this will prevent forgiveness. I don't want anything a part of that. I want to go towards that more beautiful life. And the sexual very well may happen in the relationship. It very well may not. That's unto the couple to figure out. But let these characteristics be the foundation for how you overcome it, how you deal with it and regard it. That if it happens, let it happen after these thoughts have been your foundation. And they will carry you. I wholeheartedly know that they will carry you where you need to be. So from here at the Wolfpack, we're out of time, but we surely wish you well and Godspeed in your journey. I got faith in you. You can do it. Peace.